Hi, this is the third part of our Chapter 9 discussion. We were talking about structuring and outlining your speech in the previous two segments, and today's segment is introducing and concluding your speech. So we already know that the introduction and conclusion need to be written out with every word because what you see is what you say. So first of all, the way you put it on paper needs to be very clean, very clear. There is no scratching, deleting, because that will confuse you when you're looking at the page. And if you're looking at a physical piece of paper, make sure that it is comfortably, detached from other papers, that you can slide them over and go to the next page without shuffling too much. That you double space the lines if you need to see it properly, and if you're comfortable with all caps, do all caps. If not, regular capitalization. Another little tip from my history of broadcasting in radio: using ellipses instead of a full stop, or actually instead of a comma, would really help you make the pause that's necessary to take a breath, to separate one part of your sentence from the other, and to take appropriate pauses so that your speech is actually very well paced. So the book has video and audio materials that I hope you have access to and you can listen and watch without me. I'm just here to go over some of the material, emphasize some of the important parts so that we can take our quizzes properly. So once you have made the body of the speech clear with points and subpoints, the next part is to write the intro and the conclusion very precisely and very in a detailed fashion. In the textbook, we have the Pope speaking, Pope Francis speaking in person. I think he's just a good speaker. Pope Francis is said to build a good relationship with his listeners because he finds the values and interests that people share with him and capitalizes on them. He appeals to them. Introducing your speech can happen in many different ways, but first of all, you need to capture people's attention. A boring intro means people are not going to be interested in hearing you. So saying that, "Good morning, this is what I'm going to talk about," is not enough. First of all, you need to recognize the audience, the time and place, the occasion. Say something that brings you all together. Comment on something relevant, comment on the conditions, comment on what was before or what's coming up next, in order to make this very obvious connection with your audience, meaning that you're all in the same place at the same time. You can also capture the attention of your audience by acknowledging them, by saying that you're impressed to see that so many people have attended your session. You can refer to shared interests and shared values. You can invite people to participate. You can use appropriate humor. You can open with a story, open with a quote, or you can surprise the audience. Well, in our textbook it says startling, but I would use the word surprise in a good way, shocking in a good way, giving them some information that they didn't expect. Maybe showing something, maybe playing some music. So acknowledging the audience, location, or occasion is the obvious thing to do. It's a good connection, a good bridge into the content of your speech. Invoking the shared values and interests, apparently that's what the Pope does, because the Pope's audience is very, very specific. It is the faithful people. So it is easy to find the shared values. It is different to do in a classroom full of people with diverse backgrounds, diverse interests. So you need to find something that unites them all. The reason why they're all here, the reason why we're trying to build something together or achieve a goal. Another way of uniting the audience is urging participation. If there are rhetorical questions to ask, put them up front and invite people to participate in the process of your speech, starting from the very beginning, inviting your audience to take part, to get engaged into something that needs a solution. Using appropriate humor, you need to be very careful not to use humor just for humor's sake. Um, I would like to show you this one example from the textbook, and then maybe something else that I will post separately. But in our textbook, we read that in his remarks to the Radio and Television Correspondents Association dinner in 2007, President George W. Bush used humor to address his historically low approval ratings. He said, "A year ago, my approval rating was in the 30s. My nominee for the Supreme Court had just withdrawn, and my vice president had shot someone. Oh, those were the good old days." So he's making fun of himself. He's not insulting anyone. He's using facts that are pretty well known, especially to a group of journalists who were at the TV and Radio Correspondents Association dinner. But by making fun of himself, he's also surprising the audience. Oh, those were the good old days, because his bigger troubles were yet to come. So in this case, his target is himself, and it is a safe way to make fun of somebody who's not going to be embarrassed, affected, or insulted. But humor can be abused a lot of times, and unless your genre is comedy, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to use too much of it or use inappropriate humor. Just to be funny, it's not enough. Keep it relevant to the topic. We see in our speaker's note, use humor to put audiences at ease rather than the other way, create tension. And to do that, we avoid religion, ethnicity, race, sex. All of this is raising red flags and speaks poorly of you. You don't poke fun of other people, but just maybe yourself. Don't use humor that makes a serious topic trivial, like don't make fun of the Holocaust or a pandemic or illness, aging. Avoid planned humor if you're really anxious about speaking, because if you're making an awkward joke, nobody will laugh and it would be horrible. You can also open with a narrative, a story, an example, an anecdote. That's a good thing to do, but also remember to use words carefully. There are action words that will show dynamic movement, dynamic happenings in your narrative. Rocking, blowing, crashing are brought up in your chapter, but I would say avoid using words with baggage. Avoid using words and phrases that can be sensitive to some people. You can, in the same way, open with a quotation from a well-known person. And finally, startling or surprising the audience is a good way to grab attention, but be careful again not to shock them too much. So the notes are to acknowledge the audience, location, occasion, invoke shared interests, values, invite to participate, engage with relevant humor, relevant and safe, harmless humor, open with a narrative, story, and a striking quote, or surprise your audience with a piece of powerful information or a new approach. You also need to establish your credibility, a little bit about your background, about yourself, the reasons you think you're the right person to deliver that information would always help with the ethos part. And then preview your message. Sometimes it's good to tell people what the speech is going to be about. And finally, moving on to the conclusion, once your body is written, the body of your speech is done, a conclusion is an important way of wrapping it all up. A good conclusion summarizes your message, and it doesn't just say, in conclusion, we learned that blah, blah, blah. Go beyond simply repeating your main points. Instead, use this as a chance to reflect, to invite people to think, reinforce the central message, and to actually invite people to do something. Concluding remarks should echo the introduction. If you started with a question, you can close with an answer. You can restate the relevance of your message to the audience. You can call people to action, invite people to do something about an issue, a topic, asking a rhetorical question at the very end. I'm not really a big fan of rhetorical questions or questions in general. But it is easy to build it into your speech if the topic invites such a question. Closing with a narrative, with a story, also makes sense. You can close with a quote, a quotation. You can close with a metaphor. Those are really good things to help people remember your speech, especially the metaphor. Just summarize it, make it more compact, make it more relatable, and just leave them with a visual image of something that is not direct, not literal, but metaphoric. And finally, use strategic repetition to bring the message home. I think those are some of the main points of the chapter. And the rest of it is evolving around examples, finding your own voice, and using good tactics, good techniques to bring a good, strong introduction, conclude with a strong conclusion. I would invite you all to read the chapter very carefully because it is full of audio-visual information and samples of speeches. I will also share other samples throughout the course, and I will post them on Blackboard separately. Okay, so we'll see you next time.